back to another episode of Riders Block. I'm your host, as always, Journal staff writer Sean Reider. Today we have a great interview lined up with Brent Briggeman. He covers Air Force football for the Gazette. Brent does an awesome job covering Air Force. He's kind of like the guy, really, if you want to learn anything about Air Force football. So I highly recommend following him and his work heading into this Saturday. Pretty big game in a lot of respects for UNM. They don't quite control their own destiny in terms of the Mountain West Championship, but this is kind of a must-win to kind of keep those talks up at 4-2 in conference. If they get to 5-2, and a pretty big season finale then with San Diego State. But Air Force is no pushover, and Brent kind of details some of the things there that makes Air Force a dangerous opponent for UNM. But before we get into our interview with Brent, as always, I want to encourage you guys to if you like these podcasts, if you like watching them, if you like listening to them, please subscribe to the Albuquerque Journal YouTube where you find these podcasts and watch them. Please also, follow the feeds on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Your support, enables us to do these podcasts. We like doing them. We think there's been some good work being put out recently, and we encourage you guys to keep following along as always. And if you like kind of the weekly or bi-weekly live shows that Jeff Grammer and I do, after Jason Eck's weekly press conference and then after every football game on Saturdays or Fridays, encourage you guys to keep tuning into those. We enjoy doing those as well, and I think the listener interaction is really what makes those shows so enjoyable. With that being said, that's the same spiel I always give. Let's get into something new with our interview with Brent Briggeman.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
All right, today I am pleased to be joined by Brent Briggeman, Air Force beat writer for the Gazette. He does a great job covering Air Force football and other sports as well. Brent, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing good. The season here is winding down after the 7th loss last week. It looks like it will come to a conclusion in about 10 days. So, there's the finish line is coming for football season, which I'm sure you can understand is a significant milestone every year.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird too, because normally around this time an Air Force New Mexico matchup, New Mexico will be winding down their season as opposed to Air Force and all that as well. But not the case as you kind of touched on. Air Force is 3-7 heading into this one, I believe 2-4 in the league. What has kind of went wrong for Air Force this season? Because I think a lot of us kind of expected Air Force to kind of get back to a normal level this season.
Yeah, I did too. I figured it was all going to hinge on the quarterback position, but honestly, the quarterback position's been great. Liam Zarka really took that over and played some great football. What ended up happening was kind of a perfect storm in the defensive secondary. They had several guys graduate. All the cornerbacks who had played were gone. And then they thought they were going to have two safeties back. One of them ended up hurting his knee, missed the whole season. The other one was hurt a little bit in practice and then just never really got going. And then on top of that, you had a nickel player who was probably their best defensive player over the final 2 or 3 weeks of the year last year. He transferred. One of the defensive ends transferred. And Air Force is one of those places, you just can't take too many hits in one position group because it's not like they can go fill from the portal. They've got to have homegrown guys step in. And all of those guys were freshmen and sophomores. And so it took them a while to really get going. They've played a lot better defense over the past 3 weeks, but they just got hit. They had all these new guys in the secondary with no experience, and then they get hit with Hawaii, Boise State, Utah State, all the UNLV, all these kind of high-octane passing offenses with complicated schemes. And, they were drinking from a fire hose and just couldn't stop anybody defensively. So even though Air Force was scoring 38, 40 points every game, they were losing by a touchdown or a field goal because they just couldn't quite keep up. And so that was a really weird position to see Air Force in because they're just not generally in that position. But again, with the way they have to recruit and, bring in players, you can understand how if a few things go wrong with, especially 3 or 4 players coupled with kind of a mass graduation, it can lead to this kind of situation.
That was something Jason Eck kind of talked about in the press conference yesterday as well. The first half of the season, like you said, they're playing all these high-octane offenses and they're giving up points all over the place. Really kind of the last 4 games, though, maybe not quite playing as high-octane offenses, to say the least, although San Jose State is certainly in that mix. But really, those point totals have gone down. He said he kind of thought, that Air Force was playing more zone and just doing a better job eliminating, big plays. What have you seen in terms of how they maybe haven't quite righted the ship defensively, but have gotten, a lot better, with the past midseason point?
I mean, I think the pass rush has been a lot more effective. That's one thing. San Jose State especially, they batted down 4 or 5 balls at the line of scrimmage and just kind of kept the quarterback, off balance and, removed the quarterback for one play, and next guy came in and fumbled. So, then they picked off some passes. They've been a little more opportunistic. They've got interceptions past 2 weeks. But yeah, I think it's everything. It's the teams they're playing just don't have the same systems where they're sending a bunch of receivers, other than, like I said, San Jose State. And I think these guys have grown up. I think they've seen enough football now to where, when you're telling them something during the week, it really can stick a little bit because they know from their own experience what it is you're talking about. So I think lessons are a little more impactful. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any massive scheme differences or anything. They do have a different guy calling plays. They haven't made a change at defensive coordinator, just simply Nick Toth is calling the plays. But he was also calling the plays for UNLV and Navy, and those were big point totals on defense. So I don't think it's one thing. I think the biggest thing, like when Troy Calhoun was talking about New Mexico, like what has changed? Generally, you start with personnel. And so I think the personnel in the secondary is just a little bit better right now.
Jason Eck also said that, he said, really, I mean, they've lost Air Force has lost 3 games by 3 points, and he kind of stood up there and like a lot of coaches said, this could easily be a 6-win team and all that. Is there actually that kind of that vibe from the program though? The sense of like, hey, wait, we're a lot better than the record might suggest.
Yeah, I mean, going into last week, they had scored and given up the exact same number of points. So it comes down to had they made one stop. You can start to nitpick each game, but based on what happened last year, Air Force started 1-7. And then they really got going and they won their last 4 games. So I think there was a real confidence this year when they were 2-6 that they could potentially win out. And they knew they had tough challenges going to San Jose, going to UConn, which is a really good team. And then obviously New Mexico doing what it's doing. But I think they just looked at their track record and thought, okay, 6-6 gets us bowl eligible. We can win these 4 games. And I think there was a real confidence they could do it. So I don't think this team's ever really doubted itself. It's just been, like we said, just a weird year for Air Force.
Offensively,
and now you throw in the quarterback situation, and now all bets are off. So who knows what's going to happen?
We'll get to that in a bit too. But offensively, man, this is a really explosive unit for a lot of the year. Like really, kind of like matched a lot of the high octane stuff they were seeing. O-line, I think, was a Joe Moore Award watch list. They were on that kind of earlier in the season as well. What is, last year, kind of when New Mexico played Air Force, there was clearly some issues offensively and all that as well. And then New Mexico, I think, ended up still giving up a season high in points for Air Force at the time, 37. What has kind of gone right with this offense to this point, and what has kind of worked out?
Well, you mentioned the offensive line. That was comparing with last year, the offensive line was brand new. And again, it goes back to the way Air Force runs its, when you get a loaded class and then you suddenly lose them all at once, it's just a weird spot because you're not plucking from guys who have 2 years of experience somewhere else. They're guys who have come from your system, and sometimes that works immediately and sometimes it just doesn't. And so last year they broke in 5 new starting offensive linemen, and they didn't have a set quarterback. It just took a while to find the right combination there. And they finally did. Like I said, down the stretch, they averaged something like 330 yards rushing over the last 4 games, just really got the fullback going. And so they figured that out and then brought back most of that line this year. They lost quarterback, but stumbled into Liam Zarka, who was a revelation. Not stumbled into, obviously he was the guy they targeted as a recruit and developed, but you never expect the kind of production he showed as a sophomore. But I think it was just a matter of, again, kind of multiple factors. They were playing from behind a lot, so they had to kind of air it out a little bit. And once you start utilizing different parts of that offense and teams can't just key on the fullback and the option game, that's an awful lot to defend, especially when they do one thing so well. So they were still able to run the ball effectively, but also, hit the tight end a lot more. Bruin Fleischman has a catch in every game, which is bizarre for an Air Force tight end. Like he started all games last year and caught 4 passes. This year he has, again, a catch in every game. He's a legit talent. I think he's going to go somewhere as a grad transfer, and we'll see just how good he can be in a normal offense. But so yeah, they just got a lot of skill, a lot of older players, and a lot of experience, except for a quarterback. And then they found a guy who could just come in right away. So it's just one of those years where I don't want to say it's an anomaly, but certainly it did align where they had a lot of that experience, and then again, extreme talent at the quarterback spot.
We kind of pushed it off with the quarterback discussion. Obviously, Liam Zarka, kind of came in, was absolutely awesome, but Zarka, I believe Troy Calhoun said it is now like kind of like basically effectively a season-ending arm injury suffered against UConn and all that as well.
It was a fracture. Yeah, he broke his arm at UConn.
Now it is, I believe it's Kemper Hodges, who's nicknamed, he's 6 foot, 245 pounds, nicknamed Big Bad Basic, converted fullback stepping in, although he did play quarterback in high school. What are you expecting out of him this week?
Yeah, I mean, his story is so bizarre. I mean, he was a 3-star quarterback recruit out of Florida. Like, Air Force doesn't get a lot of those. So, like, he was a legit quarterback. And then he split time. He went to prep school and split time with Quentin Hayes, who started last year at quarterback. And then Air Force moved him to fullback. And he bulked up. He's an extremely strong guy. And then in spring ball this past year, they realized they had a lot of fullbacks. They were very deep there. And they thought, hey, let's, and this wasn't even the plan going into spring ball. It was like 4 practices in. They're like, let's move him back to quarterback, see what we have there. And then he moves up the depth chart. And now, he was the one who came in, played half the game at UConn when Zarka went out. And now he's the presumed starter this week. So the body type looks a little bizarre because, he, again, became a fullback. But, he's an effective runner. And the few times he did need to throw and even improvise a little bit at UConn, he looked very comfortable doing it. So I think people are expecting, okay, this is just a run-first guy who can't do anything else. But I think that it's just a weird profile that people aren't accustomed to seeing. And I do think he has a pretty complete skill set. But, again, we haven't seen him going into a week as a starter and then play a full game.
Well, Ike even said it yesterday. He's like, that's got to be the biggest option quarterback like I've ever seen in my life. He's like, this guy is massive. He's a load going downhill. But obviously, Air Force at this point, in terms of like bowl motivations and bowl hopes and conference championships, it's not quite there. Weirdly enough, again, in the way it is for kind of New Mexico and all that. How have you seen kind of Air Force and Coach Calhoun and all that kind of talk about this game and treat this game at this point in the season?
I mean, their public face is always the same. I mean, They are, I know every team says the same things, but, just based on what I saw last year and what I've seen over the years, when they have gotten out of bowl eligibility, they have not taken the foot off the pedal at all. Again, last year, that 4-game winning streak came after the 7th win or 7th loss. So they weren't playing for bowl eligibility, and they still put together, in a difficult stretch with a couple of road games. So they're still going to be motivated. This certainly isn't one of those games where there's a heated rivalry. It's certainly a familiar opponent, but it's not one that there's no animosity. But I think especially playing their last game at home for the seniors, that always means a ton at Air Force. So they'll be motivated by that. There's also, they rank, I think, 8th in APR, whatever the graduation rate metric is. So there's always that hope that they will get into a bowl game if they can get to 5-7. So there is still that bowl motivation. But again, I just don't think motivation's ever really an issue for Air Force because, just because of the way Troy Calhoun is and the tone he sets for the program and the fact that the vast majority of his assistants are also graduates from the Air Force Academy. So, these are guys who are just conditioned in a little different way mentally. And so, I haven't heard anything that suggests this is any different than any other game, this week.
In terms of the actual on-field, product we're expecting this week and all that, with obviously, I mean, I guess, if you could consider Hodges a backup quarterback and all that as well, what are you kind of expecting, in terms of an on-field result or a score prediction? Off of what you've seen in New Mexico and off of what you've seen with Air Force? Because I know the quarterback is it's a tricky one right there.
Yeah, I mean, New Mexico is such a tough read for me because, I've seen him for so long. Every year is just a completely different story. No program has as much variance from year to year as New Mexico that I've covered in the Mountain West. I mean, I've seen Air Force go down there and win by like 40 points. I've seen them lose most of their games down in Albuquerque. And then I've seen Air Force win, I think, every single time at Falcon Stadium, unless I'm forgetting one.
New Mexico has not won in Falcon Stadium since 2000, I believe. So I think you've seen only wins.
Yeah. I mean, I saw Air Force shut out New Mexico during 2020 when Air Force had like 40 defensive players leave the academy for a semester. So they had all these, they kind of put together this defense and shut out New Mexico. So again, my read on New Mexico, especially at Falcon Stadium, is probably not fair to what New Mexico is this year. But having not just seen them in person, it's tough to kind of picture. But obviously they rebuilt. They have really good coach. They got a lot of good transfers in. They're playing really good football. So I know it's going to be a massive challenge for Air Force, and especially when Air Force is going to have a brand new quarterback. So I don't know what to expect from Air Force offensively. If they're going to kind of strip down and just play a lot of option football, or if they're going to continue to open up the way they did and maybe see what Kemper Hodges can do in that respect. So I can't imagine either team blows out the other. I don't think Air Force could possibly blow out New Mexico with as good as they are this year. And I just don't think anybody can come to Falcon Stadium, anybody who's not Boise State during some of his best years, or, Navy last year. It's just Air Force plays everybody tight. So, it's going to be who can grab that one pick or fall on the loose ball. I think, it's going to come down to something small probably, unless the offense just falls flat for Air Force. I think that's the one variable that could really change things. But I think Air Force's defense has figured things out enough to where they're not going to give up 48 points, the way they did pretty consistently there for a while earlier this year. So we'll just see. And if Air Force can possess the ball the way they sometimes do, for 40 minutes in the game, then suddenly it limits the opportunities for New Mexico, and who knows? So I don't know. I'm predicting something that comes down to a field goal.
Yeah, and this is an interesting game possession-wise, because obviously Air Force is going to dominate possession, and they're going to at least limit possessions in most games. But UNM plays slow enough to where they already have pretty limited possessions anyways. I'll put it this way. In at least one spot, Air Force actually opened as a 1-point favorite. Now pretty much everywhere I've seen it, New Mexico is a 3.5-point favorite. Do you think New Mexico covers that number, or you think Air Force gets in there and kind of gets that half point or more?
I stay out of the gambling realm. I think Air Force has played so many 3-point games. I think it's going to come down to literally 3 points. So I guess that would mean New Mexico doesn't cover. But again, I don't wade into those waters. So we will see. And there could always be injuries. I don't know about at Air Force either. We'll see what the injury report says. They certainly. We didn't know Zarka was hurt until he didn't come out for a series. Like he did, Air Force players never stay down on the field. So it's so hard to get a read on who's hurt. I mean, literally, I can't think of 3 times this year an Air Force player has stayed down with an injury. So you only find out about the injuries after the fact. And Troy Calhoun certainly isn't going to let anything slip out. So, I'm glad we have the injury report out to at least get a sense of what's going on, because before that, nobody knew. They, especially since they've closed practices there, it is a tight ship they run.
I was gonna say I was feeling pretty good for you and some other beat writers when the availability reports were initially announced. To finally just get some kind of good picture of what's actually going on.
Yeah, we don't have to check sources on, hey, how's this guy's ankle? We can just get I hate that stuff. So very, very clear now.
Brent, thank you so much, man. As always, awesome conversation. And I will be seeing you Saturday at Falcon Stadium, man. Thanks again.
Safe travels. Sounds like we're supposed to get some snow later this week. So
yeah, I'm hoping not too much, but we'll see what happens there, because I am making that drive. But yeah.
No, I know that road well. So all right, well, drive safely, and we'll see you there.
All right, thank you so much, Brent. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.